In 1917, the Russian Empire, one of the largest and oldest in the world, collapsed in a matter of days. But what followed was not peace. It was chaos. It was war. A brutal, unrelenting struggle for the soul of a nation. Brother against brother. Peasant against prince. Red against white. This was the Russian Civil War. And it would decide the future of Russia and the fate of the 20th century. In February 1917, after centuries of autocratic rule, Tsar Nicholas II was overthrown. The Russian people, starving, exhausted by World War I, and desperate for change, rose in revolt. A provisional government took power, but it was weak, divided, ineffective. Meanwhile, a rival force was rising in the shadows, the Bolsheviks, a radical Marxist faction led by Vladimir Lenin. They promised land, peace, and power to the people. And in October 1917, they struck. The Bolsheviks seized Petrograd in a near-bloodless coup. They toppled the provisional government and declared a new order, rule by workers and peasants. But Russia wasn't united behind the red banner. It was splintering. From 1918 to 1923, Russia was plunged into civil war. On one side, the Reds, the Bolsheviks, now calling themselves communists, led by Lenin and his ruthless warlord, Leon Trotsky. On the other, the Whites, a loose coalition of monarchists, liberals, nationalists, and ex-imperial officers. They didn't agree on what they wanted, but they all wanted the Bolsheviks gone. The front lines stretched from the Arctic Circle to the Caucasus Mountains. Cities changed hands. Villages were razed. Atrocities were committed by both sides. Trotsky rebuilt the Red Army from scratch. Discipline, propaganda, and sheer terror. He used former Tsarist officers under strict surveillance. He shot deserters. He crushed uprisings. The Whites, despite foreign aid from Britain, France, Japan, and the United States, were disorganized, divided, and often brutal in their own right. This wasn't just a war between armies. It was a war between ideologies, and it spilled into every corner of the former empire. In Ukraine, nationalists fought for independence. In the Caucasus, ethnic groups declared their own republics. In Siberia, the Czech Legion, foreign soldiers stranded by war, briefly seized entire railway lines. The war birthed chaos. Warlords ruled like medieval kings. Bandits roamed the countryside. Entire communities were wiped out in pogroms and reprisals. And then came the Red Terror. Lenin's secret police, the Cheka, were unleashed to crush dissent. Suspected enemies of the revolution, real or imagined, were executed without trial. Entire families disappeared. Fear became the new currency of control. The Western powers were alarmed. A communist regime in the heart of Eurasia threatened to spread revolution worldwide. Britain, France, the US, and even Japan sent troops to support the White forces. But their missions were unclear, their numbers small, and their commitment half-hearted. To the Russian people, they looked like invaders. The Bolsheviks used this to rally support. Foreign imperialists, they said. Enemies of the revolution. For many Russians, torn between famine and fear, the Reds, despite their brutality, began to look like the lesser evil. By 1920, the tide had turned. The Red Army had retaken Siberia. White generals, like Kolchak in the east and Denikin in the south, were defeated and driven into exile. The last major white stronghold, in Crimea under General Wrangel, fell in 1920. Hundreds of thousands fled the country. Intellectuals, nobles, former officers, never to return. But the war wasn't over. Peasant revolts erupted, including the massive Tambov Rebellion. Even sailors, the original Bolshevik allies, turned against the regime in the Kronstadt Rebellion of 1921. Lenin responded with overwhelming force. When the guns finally fell silent in 1923, Russia was unrecognizable. More than 10 million people had died, most from famine, disease, and mass executions. Cities were hollowed out. Farmlands were scorched. Orphans wandered the streets. Entire generations lost. The revolution had won, but at a cost almost too great to measure. The Soviet Union was born from this wreckage. an authoritarian state forged in war, led by a party that had learned to rule by fear, and that would never let go of power. The dream of a workers' paradise had morphed into something far darker. The Russian Civil War was not just a struggle for control. It was a struggle for identity, for survival, for meaning. It toppled an empire, unleashed a new ideology, and laid the foundation for one of the most powerful and feared states of the 20th century. It taught the Bolsheviks a cruel lesson, that revolution is not enough. You must crush all enemies, real or imagined. The echo of that war would be heard again, in Stalin's purges, in the gulags, in the Iron Curtain that would divide the world. Because the Russian Civil War didn't just rewrite Russian history, it rewrote the future.